All right, we are back from our bio break. And
A question, if you don't mind. I was going to ask before we get, I lose it, and I was just going to ask if the subcommittee would find it helpful if we received a kind of a comm update like we get from Dan Claypool every week. He sends out an executive director update that talks about all the things that has come up for him that week and status updates on the major issues at hand. I was wondering if that's something that the subcommittee would find helpful in receiving from Mr. Wilcox, or if that's something the committee at large should receive. Just something I wanted to discuss with you. Do you know what I'm talking about, Rob?
Yeah, I think that would, yes, I'd be happy to do that.
But if we could maybe narrow it to, a few of the things that so we're not having, Rob's not having to give us a blow-by-blow.
Right, and Commissioner, that's a really good point. I think I would also like to get a sense when we're leaving this commission meeting is that, because we have covered a lot of ground. We have talked about a lot of subjects and reaching out to a lot of different ideas. And I know we did do a little bit of this already to talk about the top priorities, but I would also like to hear from the committee expectations.
yeah, I mean, I think we don't need an exhaustive report. A set of bullets would be fine in terms of, what you're working on and what, just think of it as a weekly status report or something like that. It can be short and sweet.
And when would commissioners like to have that on a Friday, or just do you have a preference for a day?
Doesn't matter to me.
Once a week,
One thing, and I ran across this, and I had a very brief and substantive conversation with Dan. I'd asked for something I wanted to get hard copy because my printer, I get my stuff on my computer, does not hook to a printer. And so I said, can you just fax me this stuff? Just give me a hard copy. And I'm a hard copy person anyway. And he talked about the lack of staff, and it struck me because I spent 10 years on the school board, 4 years on the city council, and the big difference between the two was that the city council had all kinds of staff. You could ask anything, all kinds of stuff. The school board had no staff because it was all in the classroom. And I learned to not ask, because the superintendent would certainly have been glad to do it. But don't ask if you really don't want it. Don't ask, because the staff will do it, but it takes away from something else. It's a zero-sum game.
Well, this would be very easy to do, and I'm happy to do it.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, and so I would suggest just short bullets. Don't belabor over it. It's really just an update to forestall questions from all of us.
Yeah, and I think we're going to be especially interested in knowing how the Twitter, Facebook, web stuff is coming along, so that we have a sense of how broadly our message is getting out there in that regard. Maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but that's what I'd like to see happening. And then also how the media contacts are coming along.
So, and that stuff, of course, it's if you know Twitter, you can just go and you can track it any time. And so that might simply be instruction for the commission. Here's how you check our Twitter account and our Twitter stream.
And
it will
would
say
you be looking at anyone in particular when you say?
Not at all, Commissioner Raya.
Glance in my direction.
But, I mean, a lot of this stuff is self-monitoring. So literally people need to know, what is our Facebook website address? How do we check the Twitter stream? And so if you just instruct us once, you will, can just direct people to check it themselves, so you don't have to do it again.
Right. And let me just take that point just a little bit further in that those are measurements, how many followers we have on Twitter and Facebook, and what kind of messages and input that we're getting. That those are important measurements regarding our message and who it's getting out to and how many people are out there. And then, of course, the other measurement of our success will be in monitoring the output of articles and interviews and that type of thing to see how it grows and to who we're reaching.
And actually, one of the things I had asked you about before, I'm wondering if you have that for us, which is I'd asked you to track all the speaking engagements, because we kind of randomly find out that you went to the Chinese elected officials thing, and I just happened to know that Commissioner Antai spoke to a couple of classes, right? And
Right.
so how do we get a report so we can track where all the other commissioners are doing things, and we would like to know kind of what kind of outreach has been done?
Right. And so there are just very few that are coming up. There's, I think most of them were in the last week or 10 days. There's, one that you have, and I think there might be a couple more that are coming online. I have not heard from commissioners. That is a good point, number one, to remind commissioners that, to make sure they're communicating that with me. And then also, how about putting that schedule together in my weekly report? Would that be?
Yeah, that would
Okay.
be great. And in fact, again, we're trying to reduce the reporting overhead. You might just consider, having commissioners self-report on a Google Doc that we just keep adding to with the date.
Actually thinking that there must be a way to put it on there, just like we do our availability calendar.
Yeah.
Something where, okay, we went and did this and we're posting it.
Right. And then some of it will be easy then for me to do as well, because on some of the major speaking engagements where I'm the one that's generating them, as in the California Women Lead, that I have all the details, and then it's just easy for me to send that to you, talk to you, and then put it on the Google Doc.
Right,
Okay.
right. And so that way, maybe that will reduce some of your email traffic, and you can just check that on a regular basis. And then that could be used as fodder. I mean, in fact, we may want to do it directly on Facebook. I mean, we can think about that, because some of it will be announcing what the schedule is looking forward, and some of it's a historical record. I had suggested to Mr. Wilcox that we have kind of, kind of the where's Waldo idea. It's like, where in California are commissioners? Today, Commissioner Forbes is speaking at blah, and, Commissioner Ward is speaking at this club, whatever, so that there is, it does a couple of things, right? It first lets the rest of the commission know what's going on, but more importantly, it lets the public know that we are getting out there, and what kind of groups we're speaking to, and what kind of audiences, and, what kind of vehicles.
One thought on this, this business card is going to be about this big at this point, as to whether we want to put on the front of it some of these social media sites that they can go to, so that they can just look at the card and they can,
Absolutely. So in addition to the website, we'll have our Facebook
Exactly.
thing, and we'll have our, Twitter.
Right.
If we have the website list, though, for, I guess, aesthetic and simplicity, that will have on the homepage links to all of our social
Yes,
media,
yes,
right?
yes.
So
Yeah.
would that be?
But not everybody's on the net, which is why it's good to have it on a business card.
Okay.
And they need to know
These
where
are
to
all
go.
net-based social media, right?
Right, but they need to know where to go to
But
start.
you're suggesting just put one thing rather than all.
Put the
Is that what
home
you're saying?
the website up, and if on the homepage are links to all of our social media conduits, then
You're assuming we have control of our website.
I am naive.
So, the discussion we had about a potential tagline was really great, but the other thing that I thought would be good, if you could help us standardize a signature for all the commissioners, which would have our website, our Twitter account, whatever, and have a tagline, and so that we all have a consistent signature on our emails, so that when we send emails out, the right information is going out as well.
What do you mean by signature?
So the signature is what goes underneath every email. If you specify signature, is what goes underneath your name.
Oh.
So it might say Stanley Forbes, Commissioner, Citizens Redistricting Commission, www.wedrawthelines.ca.gov.
So you're thinking.
See us on Twitter, whatever, real power for real people. So a lot of that stuff that might go on the business card should actually go in an electronic signature too.
Dan won't cut it.
Dan won't cut it. So it's essentially an electronic business card
Okay.
that goes out and will automatically be appended to every email
Okay.
that you send. So
Okay.
when we communicate with the media or other organizations, it will
Okay.
have all that information there. So I think all that information should be in the e-form as well as the printed form when we can actually get business cards.
Thank you.
So we have, I believe, a little less than an hour left. One of the things that I wanted to make sure that we got through, and then I'll just check and see if you guys had other agenda items, is I wanted to kind of go through in some detail some financial assumptions to make sure that all of the stuff that you have planned for the media plan is that we actually have the resources to do them.
Right.
And I also wanted to look through the CCP proposal that we got, because there were many items in there that really look like I would expect a communications director to do.
Yes.
And you, in fact, have done some of that work already.
Right.
And so I want to be clear that we're not double paying.
Do you have the CCPC okay, good, because I did not bring it, but I can tell you, so I don't want to get out of order, but I can tell you the things that were taken off, that
Okay.
because you and I had that conversation, and that there were definitely things that,
I mean, some of these are great ideas, but there may be things that you would want to do directly and have control over rather than having a consultant do it.
you're going to make me put my glasses on.
But, I mean, outside of, you've identified, a couple of things that I can see that I would want in the financial projections. One is obviously purchasing the media list, which we talked about last time, so there's a cost to that. Everything else you've identified is basically free, and it's
Right.
labor mostly.
Right.
It's your time, and it's our time.
Right.
And probably some extra travel.
I spoke to Dan, and I know he was going to present, the whole budget to the Finance Committee, and that what we really tried to do is say, let's go to making sure that we have everything we need. As you know, as you see, I'm a big believer in free.
We are
Okay?
too.
However, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't ask for the help, and to say, that we're going to ask for extensive travel if the commissioners are on the road, and to say, hey, if we're out every day, if we go to that extent, what could it be? What is going to be the most that we're going to be spending for media lists? And if I can get something at a bargain or a discount, then we're going to save money. So equipment, I have that in there, the DAT recorders and the camcorders and the kinds of things, so that we can use that for free media to do those kinds of things. So, and I don't have it in front of me, but I know that he has a number, and that I am very, very comfortable.
Okay.
I am extremely comfortable if that came to be, because I am just making the assumption that if the money's there, great, but if we don't have to spend it, we're not going to spend it.
Right. Okay. All right, so put your glasses on.
Is this the correct one?
Yeah, there were a bunch of stuff like, that they had, the toolkit, the blog, the newsletter,
Reference,
Yeah, this is the draft Citizens Redistricting Commission budget assumptions that came from CCP at our Claremont meeting,
Dated 2/11/11.
dated 2/11/11, in which they gave us a shopping list, as they said, a grocery list of various items that they had assumed that they would provide. Although they were very clear that they weren't going to create content. So, a lot of this was, I guess format and getting things translated and whatever that they were probably going to outsource anyway. So some of this might be fine for them to do, and other things like, do we really need them to blog for us?
Right.
These are just questions that I know that I had. So I just wanted to get your thoughts.
I can tell you the things that were completely deleted.
Right.
Okay.
The blog, the newsletter, surveys. I don't have. That's that's something that they're doing that's not part of the communications. Those were the two things that I took out, and there was something else, I believe. The toolkit, I have to. My understanding is those were specific materials for their outreach, and I will. And I think we may have taken some of the hours down on that because I did have questions about how much time it takes and that we do not need to be reinventing the wheel, and many of the things that if I've already done that they can piggyback on. So I don't have it in front of me, but I know that a lot of the hours and some certain things here were reduced.
Like, what about podcasts?
I took that out.
And then some of the work that, they put in the bulk of their hours about establishing the network of on-the-ground outreach partners, and it seems like, at least it seemed in the way that they described it, a lot of what they were initially going to do for this meeting this week was simply reach out to Redistricting California, which is exactly what you did, too. So I had some questions about the overlap there as well. Now, certainly we would expect them to coordinate that. We also have to have our own relationships, so it might be a necessary duplication, but again, the number of hours was pretty significant there. So
right, and I don't know if the hours have been reduced on that or not, but it is a very good question, because especially with it, and I think then the question is for them is what kind of outreach? Is it outreach to our coalition partners, which is an email?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. Or is it we're going into a community and we're reaching out to all of these separate local community organizations? Well, what does that outreach look like?
Right.
What is the time involved in that? Because that certainly would not be. I mean, there are some things that I'm going to be doing in speaking engagements, some of the largest speaking engagements in California League of Cities and things like that, and I can definitely share information. I'm going to be sharing information for them. So I don't know how far they get down into the weeds in these community setting these up. So that would be a good question to ask. But as far as my time in doing things as I go along, I'm sharing and happy to share.
So this raises a bigger question, and I'll bring this up in the Finance and Administration Committee meeting as well, but who is actually going to be responsible for managing the relationship with CCP? Because it's going to obviously affect a number of different functions here. And, someone needs to be watching them on hours, because this can run out very, very, very fast.
He's not in the room, but I'm going to speak for our executive director that I know that he is on top of that on a more than a daily basis, I will tell you, because I'm aware of the conversations and the emails and the expectations, and they have a strong manager on someone that's looking at what what we're being charged, and I've heard him say, and I think you all have too, about this creeping numbers that grow, or certain things are added and that's not to be tolerated. And also, I'm working with CCP. I wouldn't say that I'm the manager, but I'm also watching and hearing and listening and reporting to my executive director.
Great.
So are you suggesting then that these hours could change? In other words, if we had a fixed price contract for these services, regardless of the number of hours, that'd be what we'd pay them. That's their problem.
Right.
Yeah, I
will tell you from experience, as a consultant, when I'm forced to do a fixed bid, I estimate high.
You estimate high, you don't get the bid.
It's a balance, but so I think that it just requires strong project management.
Right.
And they kind of, position themselves as the project manager, which is not what can happen. We have to manage them. So, so that's, just the question that I had. Okay, so I'm going to assume then that Dan will have the final number based on your input.
Yes.
Do other commissioners have any questions about specific items in the proposals? Because, a lot of the stuff, some of the coordination with the webmaster, it just seems like once we have our own, then
Yeah.
this will be obviated.
I think that may have been one of the areas that we spoke about. Yeah,
No, just-
definitely.
Because at $120 an hour to coordinate with a webmaster,
Right.
it's like, especially if we're going to be using Facebook instead. The coordination is put it up. That should not take an hour. So I think we're just going to have to watch the costs on that. All right. Do you guys have other specific items you want to discuss? Otherwise, I guess we'd like to see some specifics now. You said 30 major newspapers working with the editorial boards. So what's the schedule for next week?
Well, that doesn't mean that I've reached out to all of the 30 I have identified.
Okay.
And that, as we talked about in this earlier, that is the priority for the coming week, to set those within the next couple of weeks, when there's time, when commissioners have that time. Yes.
Yeah, we kind of need to do it in the next couple of weeks. So how
Right.
can we accelerate?
I
That-
have my list.
Because we, have a limited amount of time.
I know we do.
And so I'm assuming a lot of March will be kind of building this public awareness, so we can't take 2 weeks of March to, we just need to start going now. So.
Do we have something of a framework where we could get commissioners to say, here are the dates in the next 2 weeks that I'm available, preferably somewhere closer to home, so that we don't incur.
Right. I'm not concerned with that. I'm just concerned with making the making the appointments and reaching out. And so, I would say within the next 5 days. We are Wednesday. The problem is we have a commission meeting, and part of what I'm doing is, reporting on the commission and being available to the commission. So maybe we can agree on to where I can come back and there's a report status of saying, here is who I've reached out to, and here's who's responded, and here's what we have so far. You're going to see the dates as they become available, so you'll know.
I guess I'm sort of
Yeah.
looking in a reverse, coming from the other end of it and saying, I'll tell you dates I'm available, and if you come up with something, just call me and know that I'm available on March 10th or whatever. That way, that part of it's done, so you're not going to get the dates and then still have to go back and plug in commissioners.
That's,
I don't know if that's doable. I'm just,
Well, that-
we're all here, so.
Right, that should be already done on our unavailability calendar.
Right.
So maybe we just need to remind commissioners that if people need to update their unavailability, remember we talked about how we were just doing full days, and we really need to get specific, like on a particular day, not available from 7 p.m. to whatever, because there may be evening things as well, especially for the speaking engagements.
Well, I guess just if that's, I just with the understanding that we're all going to know that we're available for anything that's needed,
Yeah, so maybe
including
it's just
including that kind of
clarifying
media interview.
for the commission. So maybe we'll do that as part of our report.
that would be great.
Yeah.
That would be great, because I am relying on that. You and I have had this conversation. What I do, so everybody that knows, and Commissioner Dye knows this, when I brought a speaking engagement to her, and I had checked her availability, but I will never book someone to anything without double checking with you. So it's a good start, and I know if it says, oh, they're available, and then I'll just say, by the way, can you do this?
Right.
And because it's also something that, even though you're available, if it's something that's out of town or a long drive or something, and you can opt not to do that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's a good way to go, but I think if we remind the rest of the commission
Please.
to update, I mean, by the hour, I mean, if there are, blocks of time that you're not going to be available, you're available, but it requires scheduling, to try to put as many notes as possible on that calendar to, not only help Mr. Wilcox, but the rest of the staff schedule things that,
Right. So getting back to your question, why don't we agree out of this commission that you will have a report from me, and I can just put it into my overall report, but that, and the top priority is the scheduling of the editorial boards, and that you will see what has been accomplished by March 2nd, which would be next Wednesday, which would be a week from today?
Right.
Okay?
Yeah.
All right.
And then maybe, even after this meeting, because it will only take 2 seconds to do this, is why don't you start that Google Doc and just say, let's get a historical record first, because I know that, I know that Commissioner Forbes has done a number of interviews with various media, and, I know Commissioner Raya has, I know you've been speaking as well, so why don't we just ask all the commissioners to fill in what they have
What
done.
they've done so far.
Yeah,
Okay.
so we can at least get that historical record, and then you can, start adding the forward-looking ones. Because that can probably be done in the number of days that we're here, just to make it a homework assignment tonight to fill that in. So let's get a few of those things going. Okay, good. At this point, I'd love to open it to the public to see if you guys have any suggestions for us on anything. So feel free to come forward to the mic.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Malka Kopel from California Forward. And I wanted to begin by reiterating what Mr. Wilcox said, that we were very pleased when he reached out to us, and we want to help and support the important work that you're doing in the communications area. So we are in communications about that as well. I wanted to speak a little bit about public input and transparency. And I thought this might be the appropriate committee to talk about this. I know that the Commission is very committed to establishing a process demonstrating that public input is valued and welcomed. And I'm sure you know that, especially at this stage of the Commission's work, the actions of the Commission will be compared to the way redistricting has been conducted in the past. It may not be fair, but it is reality. And the old system is what people know, and fear can in some way infiltrate or influence your work. So the greater transparency and dedication to public input there is in your process, obviously, the less those fears will be. Californians who supported this reform and those who are checking it out want to be able to participate in a timely way from beginning to end. And that was their ability to do so, as you know, is one of the fundamental principles behind Prop 11. So we had suggestions for a few, I hope, relatively simple steps that the Commission can do to, especially in this beginning stage when you're working on your processes, to help signal your commitment to transparency. And we've shared most of these suggestions with Mr. Wilcox, but I wanted to share with the committee as well. And I know that you are working on many of these. So the first is to put, in order for the public to participate in the Commission's proceedings in time to influence your deliberations, people need to know ahead of time when they can provide testimony, so they can make travel arrangements, and et cetera. And they need to know how they can submit comments as well. So if you can continue to put timed agendas for all your meetings and subcommittee meetings on the website in advance, or Facebook, or whatever you can. That would be very helpful. And then if on those agendas you can indicate when public comment will be taken, and provide opportunities for public input throughout the meetings, not just the beginning or the end, that would also be helpful. And I know that is part of your plan. There a lot of work is happening in the meetings now, and it helps. People need the opportunity to weigh in, so I appreciate that. If you do, as you put timed agendas on the website, and this is difficult, if you could try to adhere to the agenda time, that would be appreciated as well. I know that is a challenge. One word about the many people who are trying to participate from afar. Obviously, the way that the meetings are structured at the moment benefit those of us who are lucky enough to be able to come in person. So I encourage you to give some thought about participation from afar. One suggestion that we had was to allow opportunities at the meeting for those watching the live stream to ask questions or give brief comments via email. Sometimes that would allow you the opportunity, if you chose to take it, to respond in real time, to respond to some of those questions, because there may be some confusion, and sometimes that can be preempted during the meeting, and you might find that to your advantage if there are misunderstandings that you want to address before the meeting ends. I don't anticipate a huge flood of questions, but there are a few key questions that come up, and so I don't think it would disrupt the meeting, but it would be a good opportunity. And then I obviously when and I know you're working on this, to provide opportunities for those participating remotely to provide testimony on the maps and in the pre-map meetings when that time comes. Again, know you're working on it, but want to encourage you to, as possible, to post the PowerPoint and presentations or handouts on the website when you can. Post things on the website in advance of the meeting, or if that's not possible, shortly thereafter. And then post the transcripts of the video as soon as possible after the meeting, or if that's not possible, the summary of what happened at the meeting. And I think that you'll find that for those particularly who are trying to watch and understand what the Commission is doing from afar, I think that will help a lot. So I just wanted to thank you, and again to pledge our support.
Thank you, Ms. Copel. Would another member of the public like to come forward?
I'm Deborah Howard, and I'm working with the State Chamber of Commerce and other statewide associations who were very supportive of Prop 11 and Prop 20. And I just want to echo Malka's comments on transparency. We've shared these comments with staff this past week, and I just want to reiterate to the Commission that we really want this to succeed, and we will do everything we can to support you and to help you, and one of the ways we can do that is by sharing information with our members, and the more timely that is, the more valuable it will be. So thank you, and happy to help.
Thank you, Ms. Howard.
I actually had a question for you, if you don't mind. Both of you have mentioned transparency and improving that, and I'm curious, what deficiencies are being...
An example, just this morning in the Technical Advisory Committee, they're discussing a draft request for bid, and it's not to be found. Even asking for copies is not to be found. They sent over, a message to the office, and they were going to walk copies over. It's 10 minutes ago when I checked, they're still not here. It's hard to participate in a conversation when there's a level of detail. And it's not that we want to make the decision, but there are people who are intently competent and knowledgeable whose input could help you shape your decision. And it's not possible to do that on a timely basis. The report that you were discussing in this committee, it may have been a handout because I came in late. I didn't see that. That's the kind of thing. Going back to another example would be the discussion over the hiring of the technical assistant. There was in the meeting in Claremont, it was a pretty distressing event. It just looked like that train was moving out of the station and there was not the opportunity for input in both, and it's not just the framework of the decision that you're making, but helping shape that framework. And I guess my point would be, I've never been involved in redistricting before. I am a staff person. I am way far back. I describe myself as a B-level political consultant. I'm not like one of those people who wake up in the morning and they smell the air and they know how everything has transpired. That's not me. I mean, there are people who do that. I admire them, whatever. I'm really the good government person. I want to make this all work. I think that democracy and participation is really what makes this very unique. And what's happening all over the world is, just really breathtaking. But this for California is pretty remarkable. And so, but in that universe, there's maybe 50 people whose expertise can guide you. Just as you have staff now who can guide you in the state process, there's the content process. And I know we wanted to take the politics out of this, but you can't take the policy out of it. And there is a policy about this that is not, I don't feel, giving the opportunity for full exposure. That's probably, my husband accuses me of using a lot of words. So I'm sorry if I rambled. Does that help?
No, I appreciate your input. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Howard. Yeah, that is distressing because I know that we only received the request for bid late last night, so I had assumed that was posted on the website. So, Mr. Wilcox, do you happen to know anything about that? Did it just not, it was probably after 5, I'm guessing.
Right. I do not.
Yeah.
I do not know.
Yeah, and again, we just have to ask the public's forbearance in this matter that right now we do not have control over our own website, and if something happens after 5, we can't get someone to put it up. And so that's something that we hope to solve with our Facebook site because we will be able to put it up. So maybe we can make sure that gets corrected as soon as possible, because that's
I just want to be clear. Were they talking about the draft
request for bid? Yeah.
Okay.
And that came late last night, I think. So,
and a draft,
to us.
right? But would a draft go online if it's a draft?
Sure.
Okay.
It's something we're discussing.
Okay.
Yeah. Otherwise.
Right. Oh, because it's discussed. It's agendized in a meeting. Okay. Great.
Can't respond to it. Yes, Ms. Howard.
Could you come up to a mic?
Yes. Thank you. I just have a quick suggestion that might be an interim solution for not having control over the website. There is the Redistricting California website. Is that the right name of it? Right. Redistricting California, and I bet as a partner that those documents could easily be uploaded to them, even through, other means than having staff load it to the website, and just link it to that. I mean, that might be one of the easiest ways to do that. I mean, I know the chamber would be willing to create a website that you could link to as well to kind of get out of some of that rigid structure.
Yes, it's horribly embarrassing, but
no, and
it's something we've already
I understand.
discussed.
I completely understand, and it's really, we want to help problem solve.
Yeah. So we just need to work around this until we get control again.
Well, it'd be nice to have Kirk here because, again, I'd like to know if legal sufficiency is attained by posting this on Facebook or partner sites. I question as to whether or not this needs to go, and which might increase the Secretary of State's ability to,
Yes.
meet our needs a
Respond,
little bit
yeah.
better in regards to that issue.
Yeah, it is just for members of the public who have not read through the voluminous transcripts from past meetings. The Secretary of State, like many other state agencies, under the directive right now against doing overtime, which is why we run into limitations when we're doing things after 5. And unfortunately, a lot of this stuff comes together at the last minute before a commission meeting, so we know it's highly non-optimal, and we'll just do our best to, again, try to come up with an alternative solution until we can get control of our own website. Are there other members of the public who have thoughts or ideas to share, or items that you would like us to consider for a future agenda, so we can make sure it gets on the agenda? None? Okay. If you have a thought, we still have a little more time.
Yeah, with the excellent public input received this morning, it kind of brings us back to, a point that I know Stanley's have talked about and just kind of lingered out there from week to week, and that is, I think at one time, Rob, we'd even talked about having a quick 5-minute presentation prior to the start of business, and then input meetings as well. You know what I mean? Kind of describing the process, what it is this meeting's about, and that. But it seems to me that with the issues regarding website and our ability to get our message out presently, that this is critical. I mean, I really think that we need to have a presentation at the start of each meeting that says, this is a business meeting. We're having input meetings. This is the purpose of this meeting. This is how public comment work. We're going to be hosting, here, 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 here. This is how long the speakers, the mic's going to be available to each speaker for. Some ground rules and some definition as to what. And then also, I think, we really haven't made a decision about a protocol when it comes to public comment. For example, this morning it was suggested that we might consider taking email comments and questions. And I know something that I think became grossly obvious in Claremont was that it might be a really bad practice at business meetings to get in the habit of taking questions and answering them on the spot when you've got 14 different people, you know what I mean, that have a different might have different information or different, inside things like that. So make a decision. Is that a practice we're going to participate in? Taking questions and answering them on the spot in a business meeting, or just simply take the input. I mean, these are things that I think we probably need to hammer out quicker rather than later.
Yeah, I actually think we're pretty clear on that policy, so maybe we just need to reiterate it. And
spell it out.
Yeah, I mean, we have a public comment policy, and we have a time limit for public comment not to exceed 5 minutes, subject to, looking at how many people in the room, et cetera. And we allow for public comment at the beginning, at the end of every meeting, and before any action is taken, any vote. So I think the policy is actually quite clear.
Yeah, I think, though, that there's a lot of misunderstanding that these meetings are the opportunity, to come and provide testimony input, where, like I said, we know we're trying really hard to come up with a great outreach plan to go out into the communities and get input on redistricting matters, but also that with the agenda being posted 14 days in advance, getting more and more narrow as we go and are able to do that, that email can be provided ahead of time, and also that staff presently, if you go through the site and email your question, staff provides a personal response to that question presently, and I think that's something that's important as well.
Is that true, Mr. Wilcox? We're responding personally to emails?
The executive director.
Yeah, to certain emails, I don't necessarily think it's public comment.
Yeah.
But questions, when there's, is that what you're referring to?
Public
Commissioner Ward?
questions.
Yeah, when they're saying, well, how, when is your next meeting, or questions about the commission, and I got a question the other day, what is the per diem for a commissioner? And I answer those questions.
Okay, good. But so
Yes.
it's not the executive director, it's actually, because we.
Well, no, it depends on, the executive director does answer certain questions if it's his purview, and if it's something that I may receive and get, then I would answer it, but someone would answer it.
Okay,
But
right.
present-
We're not responding to public comments.
No.
No public comment. But any question that the public has, what I mean is it's important for them to know this, is that if they email that question in, they're going to get a relatively quick turnaround with a direct answer. If they come to a public meeting and have a question, not going to get an answer. Do you know what I mean, per se? So, if I'm a member of the public and I want to answer my question, I'd like to know that, because I would email it in immediately, you know what I mean, and then get that feedback, and then maybe be better prepared to give some testimony at the meeting should that opportunity arise. So, we know that we're working hard to make these wheels go. I just don't know. I think what I'm hearing is that we're not pushing that information out so that everyone's aware of those
Our
vehicles.
policy isn't listed in every single agenda, so, I guess we could try to be more clear about that. I'm not, sure what else we can do except to.
Maybe we need to, maybe on the Facebook page we could put a how to get involved section or tab or something like that, and not only list ways that we're accessible, but recommend ways to get questions answered. I don't know if that sounds appropriate, but that kind of thing to help, like I said, steer and push, because that's my only concern is again, it seems like we continually have people that are looking for feedback or looking to provide testimony, and we want it, but unfortunately, because of all the wheels in motion and still trying to get this effort off the ground, there's better avenues for certain testimony and for certain questions to get answered or to get in the hands of people that need that information and can do the most with it than others. I don't know if we're...
I had made a comment or made a note here to myself that it seems to me that on almost the very first thing you see on the web page should be a box in bold lettering. Here's how you can participate. And just make it very clear. That's the first thing that anybody sees when they go to the website.
First box on the Facebook page.
Exactly. And that's that should be. But I do think it's useful to say, perhaps as part of our meeting agenda, always, and for the chair to announce that this is a business meeting. We have these things to accomplish, but we've set aside the hour from 3 to 4, 4 to 5, for public comment on any matter. We will not answer questions, but we will take the public comment and we'll direct staff to provide answers as appropriate after the meeting.
Right. That might solve the problem.
And just state that, here's a block of time that we're setting aside, and we reserve your comments to that block of time.
Right.
So try to control the meeting a little, structure a little more.
I completely agree, and I know we'd be discussed before having a standardized written script, for that.
Right.
I think it's just time to have it.
Please come forward.
Thank you. I wanted to speak to my comment about email during meetings. And I did not mean to imply that all questions that are asked should be answered in the meeting. But I wanted to encourage you, if you could, to give an opportunity for people to email during the meeting, so that if you saw that there were a number of similar questions about something, you could choose to take the opportunity to respond in the meeting. If not, you could direct staff you could put it on the question list before, but for later. That was, I just wanted to clarify that. It's an opportunity for you, but you can choose to take it.
Thank you, Ms. Coppell.
Presently, if I can ask how we're managing that presently is, again, not saying this is the best way, I'm just want to make sure I've got a handle on how we're handling it. That email comes in and it's presented to us in the form of hard copy. the
more
next
hard
morning. I know it's changed now, but in
Yeah.
the past, that's been the process. As of this week, those emails are being directly forwarded to our individual email accounts.
Yeah, actually, this would be a great time to clarify that. Mr. Wilcox, I noticed that we have started to receive emails with public comments. Is that the method that we're moving forward to?
There was that, and to keep the commissioners in a timely, to receive the public input in a timely way, is that they would receive that twice a week. And I guess it was a question of, it was posted in the past and commissioners would have access to that. And so I believe that what happened this time is that they actually were posted and sent to the commissioners as a reminder that they had been received. But all of those would be posted, and that they're to be sent out twice a week.
Okay, excellent, because I did actually try to go and see what public comments were, had been made since the last meeting, and I only saw the one from Ms. McDonald, which was also sent out to us.
Right.
And then I received just in the last day or two, one or two others. So I just
Right.
wanted to make sure we had actually received them all.
Yes, and I believe the commissioners have received them, and when that actually goes live on the website, but you're ahead of the curve.
Okay, great. All right. Are there any other questions, comments, feedback for Mr. Wilcox?
Should I check on Kirk?
Thank you.
Yeah, can we bring Mr. Miller back in so we can deal with that last item?
Second one on the agenda, and we had trouble getting that far into the agenda.
Okay. So, you're last on our agenda.
All right. Well, so in the training of media training of commissioners, Kirk and I were having conversations, and one of the things that was mentioned was what is appropriate to talk about and what's not appropriate. And I'm going to hand this. If you pass that down. And I think that I have Kirk here in case there are any questions regarding what's here on the paper. I think that it's when we agree to this, that then it's a vehicle and a document to be able to give to public groups when you're speaking, that I can talk to the media about that. So I think setting the parameters and being very clear on the do's and don'ts is very important.
If you like, I can offer a little color commentary
That would be
about
great.
how we got here. We start with the statute that created the commission, which has speaks directly to this in the following way. It says, commission members and staff may not communicate with or receive communications about redistricting matters from anyone outside of a public hearing. That's a very strong statement, and we have to give deference to what the proposition said about this. To me, one can analogize this something like a judge instructing the jury, and you are really the jury of this big matter. And you can say you're on jury duty. You can say I'm on a criminal case or a civil case. but you can't comment on the testimony of a witness. And another good example is you can't, let's say it's an accident case, you can't go independently as a juror and view the scene of where the cars collided. So if we think of it in those terms, there's one other thing that I think is very important. You know, the judge instructs the jury not to form an opinion about the evidence until the case is concluded. Mm-hmm. Well, I think that package works pretty well here. I think clearly this says don't comment on a map. Don't comment on an issue that would come before the commission. Really, it's asking you not, while this doesn't say don't form an opinion halfway through it, I think it does say don't express an opinion to anyone before the work is done. So it's from that basis that these guidelines are drawn, whereas the first part here is more like I'm on a jury. Mm-hmm. and that's it. Obviously, you know, your own stories are not about redistricting. Even perhaps, you know, your interest in serving in the commission. But it is easy to wander into the very broad catch-all here. So the effort is to give you a safe harbor that's clearly outside of redistricting matters, and try to keep people in the safe harbor.
I have a question, Mr. Miller. One rule of thumb that I've applied, and this is from my own experience as a consultant, I have to sign a lot of non-disclosure agreements. And usually in confidentiality agreements, there is a safe harbor statement that anything that's already in the public domain, by definition, is not confidential. And so it's not covered by any kind of confidentiality clause. So I would like your opinion. I mean, I just made a note to myself here, anything that's already on the public record. For example, what happened at the last meeting. To me, I would think that that is simply a restatement of facts in terms of, you know, we took these kinds of actions at the past meeting, you know, in January we did these things. I mean, often, you know, I'm asked, you know, what have you guys been doing?
Well, I think there's two thoughts that occurred to me about that. If you're simply recounting, for example, thinking toward the future, the commission selected line drawing consultants at the meeting, that statement of fact is probably okay. Next question. What did you think of the selection process? There were a number of people in the public that were concerned that the line drawer may be biased toward one party or the other. Did you feel that way? I think those would be questions you would not want to respond to. I would urge you not to offer any opinion or color commentary about a commission action or its processes, as opposed to simply stating, you know, that's calendared for a decision on a particular date. This highly objective information. And the other part about public record information, I think this process is different than the consulting experience in the following way. Indeed, probably all or the vast majority of the information that the commission will be using is public information. Yet, that's the very information that is so sensitive from a line drawing perspective. So I would be cautious about talking about what appears to be public domain information and is, because of the very unique responsibility of the commission.
Okay. So stick to the facts.
you know, it's public information what the voter registration is in a particular county. It's public information what the racial makeup is. But that's the sensitive information here about how that public information will be used to draw the boundaries.
Maybe Mr. Wilcox, again, like Mr. Miller suggested, thinking down the road, if we're going to have commissioners sitting at op-ed boards of local newspapers, I'm sure there's going to be, questions that we can't answer. What about things like, they're certainly going to want to know, per the census data, our county's grown, things like that. Is that type of information that simple, yes, San Bernardino County has grown, or something, and with this data, or something like that?
Well, I would absolutely stay clear and refuse to make any comment about any particular geographic area, other than to say we will be reviewing the information provided.
I don't think, I agree, I don't think you want to get, even though there's, in census data will come forward, I don't think you even want to be talking about that, and if they ask you about, well, the numbers have come in, and to not even discuss that.
Yeah, I mean, I think one way to address this without seeming like we're trying to dodge the question is simply to say, there's a great resource, it's called the statewide database, this is the URL, and you can go in there and look for your area or whatever part of the state you would like and get the latest census data.
Yeah.
So offer information, I would say. Offer the resource where the public domain information is, rather than stating it.
Yeah, the other thing is, I don't think you should be embarrassed about stating what the proposition says about your ability to communicate on these issues. That, the drafters intended to take politics and pressure away from the commission. It precludes you from making statements about any specific redistricting activity.
Yeah, I think, again, the balance is if we can appear to provide the resource that has the information without making a comment on it ourselves and just say, the census data is just out and it has been loaded into the statewide database, and if you go to, www, whatever the URL is, you will be able to verify this for yourself. But I'm unfortunately unable to comment on it, something like that. And I think that, I think people are more than happy to go do their own research.
And always just invite them to submit their comments, whatever the data shows for that, from their point of view. Please submit your comments to the commission. I can't answer it. We welcome your comments based upon whatever the facts are as they've transpired.
And our next public input hearing is?
Exactly, or you can send something in as an email or whatever, Twitter or Facebook.
Right, and just getting back to Commissioner Ward's specific question, which was to do with pointed questions at an editorial board, which, and that's why I think we're working through this today, and as you're saying that we're not dodging, we're dealing with a law that's very clear here, and so I think it's setting expectations when you're in those meetings, before the meetings.
Good point.
As you're going about trying to arrange for these opportunities, what angles then are you pitching? Would you pitch an op-ed, especially when we talk about Commissioner Forbes' idea of trying to reach out to smaller, normally disenfranchised communities? They're going to want I would imagine, more of a tailored interview or op-ed piece, to community issues in that area. If I were to be asked, are you familiar with any of the water rights issues, in this county? I'd be afraid to say yes at this point, or no, or anything. You know what I mean? Whereas I wouldn't have previous to this thought that would be again, I'm not making a judgment on it, but just have you heard of them, or have you thought, I wouldn't have thought there'd be a contentious issue or answer.
Right. But I mean, I would approach it almost in a more generic way. You could simply say, I'm sure that there are issues in your community that are really important to you. that you want to be sure that your representatives, or that you have the opportunity to have representatives that will express that point of view. This is an opportunity for you to participate, to let the commission know what those issues are, so we can identify your community of interest. And and that's so it's really important that you participate, because again, these outreach meetings are to get participation, in my mind.
And then your specific question is, how would I pitch an editorial board? Why would they be interested in what? First of all, among the news media and that will be covering this, and the local newspapers are extremely interested in this and have followed that this is a very public issue, that this is historic. They're aware of that. I think that they would be extremely interested in meeting one or two commissioners personally. They want to see. There's a lot of interest in who you all are, and to be asked to have an opportunity to say, they want to come in and they want to meet with you. Number one, they're going to love that because that access is so very important. And then they're going to be interested in the process. There is a lot you can talk about what's expected of you and what the considerations are, when the map's needed, and that's all. So I think there's plenty to keep them interested, and while not having to veer into these other areas, I'm confident.
Yeah, again, I think our main message in the next couple of weeks is, why should you care? Why is redistricting important? And I think that has to be the main message. And I love, Commissioner Forbes' idea of bringing up a couple specific examples on, which way do you want this issue to fall.
I'm sorry, I have to go because I have to go sign some checks in Davis and be back for a 1:20 interview.
If I could just make one quick comment. The statute tells us what to consider in redistricting, and I think on those issues, it's best just to refer back to the proposition and say the proposition sets out criteria for redistricting. If you try to explain those, comment on them, it quickly it's complicated stuff, and it's also been codified in a very particular way. And I think it's just best to refer back to the fact that the proposition gives you the formula that you're going to use. You're not making one up on the run, but you'll be following the mandate of the proposition without trying to go further than that.
I thank you for this, Kirk. I think it's very helpful. Again, it changes the paradigm with which I viewed it, and I certainly understand that in the just since this is the communications subcommittee, that the next couple months, again, we have a message and an awareness campaign. But beyond that, I think this, something that we'll have to take up and think about in future meetings, because I do think it will pose a little bit of an issue, as the process goes on and becomes a little bit more contentious and high profile. I think personal stories will be a thing of the past. You know what I mean? And
right.
And obviously this changes the paradigm with which I understood the playground. So that's great. Thank you very much for putting that together.
So just as a final bit of feedback to Mr. Wilcox, I do think that getting those FAQs up as soon as possible, because a lot of these questions, they're going to be, as you said, you're getting basic questions like what's the per diem and, when's the next meeting? And we should just put that up on the Facebook page as quickly as possible and just organize them into categories, questions about the selection process, questions about the outreach plan, whatever. And just draft a set of quick answers, even if they're not perfect answers. We can refine those over time, but we need to get some information up there because, people have a lot of questions, and a lot of them are the same questions. So if we can just put it up there, it will also limit the volume of questions that staff is having to take the time out now to personally respond to. Okay. If there's nothing else, I think we need to take a lunch break. All right. Any other further comment from the public? All right. Let's go have lunch.
Thank you for your input.